So that brings the total of resignations from government. There's some miscalculation here because you're including letters of no confidence submitted by backbenchers who don't have a role in government. So even being the trade envoy to Morocco counts as a government role. You now have, I think, 16 since 6 o'clock last night, and PMQs doesn't start for 20 minutes. Whew. 03456060973 is the number you need. If you want to accept an invitation that I issue every day, and I do issue it in good faith, and I don't know how long I'm going to be issuing it for. Well, this week, only 2 more days because I'm off on holiday at the weekend for a fortnight. I bet he's gone by then. It could be gone by the end of this programme, but I think it's more likely he'll be gone by the end of the week, or indeed the end of the day. I offer this, and I know sometimes you think I don't mean it, but I really do. If you just want to call in and say, that's it for me now, I can't. And the more loyal you were, even if you were one of those people who used to send me messages saying you love it because I'm so upset by this. And I'd say, but I'm upset because it's our country that's being ruined by these clowns. And you'd say, yeah, I love it. It's great. Ha, ha, ha. I love it. I love it. Oh, it's great. If you were like that and you finally, as I knew you would, I'm not being patronising. You have to. There is truth and there is untruth. And if you can hold on to the truth, even if you are the only one, you will not go mad. It's been a great comfort to me, that line from George Orwell. But it won't be much comfort to you because you were holding on to the untruth. Have you finally let go? I'd love to talk to you if that's it now. You've realised, God, what? Because what I'd like you to do is answer the question, what was I thinking? I'd love to know. I wanted to know then when you were still aboard the bandwagon. And I'd love to know now, this enormous Boris Johnson bandwagon with all sorts of lies plastered on the side of it. We don't even mention the 350 million quid for the NHS anymore. Lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. And there you were, in the box seat, banging along on this charabanc of corruption, refusing to contemplate the possibility that you were complicit in something truly disgusting, something damaging the very heart of British democracy. And now you see that you were. What were you thinking? Give me a call and tell me. 0345 6060 You've seen the light, you've let go, and you've asked yourself, what the hell was I thinking? I'd love to know what answer you come up with, because if the answer is Brexit, I've got some horrible news for you. You're not even out of the woods yet. Alice is in Northwich in Cheshire. Alice, what would you like to say? What's going on? Why are they doing it now?
Oh, well, I mean, they're doing it now entirely out of self-interest.
Not entirely. How can they be doing it entirely out of self-interest and staying entirely out of self-interest as well?
Well, it's different judgments, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it is. Is there no one nice?
But Johnson is going to cling on with his fingernails. I can't see him being prepared to suffer the ignominy of the 22 committee chucking him out.
No.
So I think because as you've always said, it's Johnson first, So I think if push comes to shove, I think he could actually call a general election.
You mean as in a cornered rat is at its most dangerous and will do absolutely anything, even pick a fight with a terrier if it's cornered. Would he be allowed to do that? I mean, I know that technically the Queen is allowed to decline a Prime Minister's request for a general election.
I don't think she would.
I don't think she would either. I mean, crikey, the poor woman is absolutely shattered at the moment as well. That's the last thing you'd need. Although Johnson wouldn't take that into any of his calculations. He was happy to send Jacob Rees-Mogg to Balmoral to lie to her.
I know, it's just... I was amazed that they got away with that in the first place.
Someone mentioned that the other day.
Everybody thought the Queen had more authority.
They've all got pictures of her on their wall. Do you remember when every time they gave an interview, they were competing to see who could have the biggest flag and the most pictures of the Queen on the wall? And I wonder if they stopped doing that after they sent Jacob Rees-Mogg to Scotland to mislead her about the illegal prorogation.
I suppose so.
That would probably be why it was. Well, I never. So, I hope you're wrong, obviously, but there we are. The idea that he might, as an act of abject desperation, call some sort of general election and say, all right, I've completely lost the support of my party, but the British public still want me and I'm going to prove it. But who? I mean, how can you even stand in a general election as an MP in a party led by someone who you've publicly disowned? or publicly condemned. What a mess. I wonder whether we're knocking at the door of having to say out loud that even those of us who predicted a mess like we had never seen before didn't actually fully predict the scale of the mess that we're seeing. That would be something, wouldn't it? Thank you, Alice. Peter is in Clydebank. Peter, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Peter.
I want to expand on one of your callers saying about the Honiton and Tiverton election result.
Yes.
I think that opens up to the Tory party the fear of the anti-Boris vote, where there's an element, maybe a soft Tory element, who normally vote Tory but will not vote for Boris. And it also shows that Labour supporters are prepared to abandon their principles and vote for any other candidate that can win. And if you do the maths, it's very possible there'll be a coalition government and it won't involve the Tories at the next election. If you get a coalition government, there's got to be a strong possibility of proportional representation, and that would pretty much keep the Tories out of power for whoever knows.
Do you know someone suggested that trying to pick the next Tory leader is like trying to pick which toilet to go to at Glastonbury? Yes. Did you see that?
Yes.
I think that's a magnificent line.
No, but what I would say is, and I've grown up under Thatcher, and I hated her policies, but you thought she had morality and ethics, and you thought she was doing what she believed was right for the country. Yeah. Same with Major, same with Cameron, same with me. Not with this man.
No, clearly not.
That's the difference.
So whoever they replace him with is going to be at least sellable as someone who's not completely corrupt.
It softens the soft sort of Tory vote. There'll always be a core Tory vote that will vote for Tories, but there's a soft Tory vote that maybe switch here or there or not vote at all, and they will come back into the fold if it's anyone other than Boris. But I think PR is the big spectre. If we get to an election and the Tories don't get an overall majority, then PR certainly could be on the table, and then you'll never get an overall majority for the Tories. I can't see how they'll.
No, I mean, and that there is an existential threat to the Conservative Party if PR is brought in by a Labour government, because it would be coalition government forevermore, but a coalition that is highly unlikely ever to involve the Conservative Party. So he could kill the Conservative Party and kill the Union, of course, and kill off the United Kingdom by having to wave goodbye to Northern Ireland, all as a consequence of Brexit. I do wonder, and we're going to have to do a phone-in on it probably when I get back from holiday, how many people realise that all of this is a direct consequence of the lies upon which Brexit was built and the doubling down upon those lies that constituted the 2019 election. Because, I mean, and in fact, it's not me that needs to prove that. You've already admitted it yourself, not Peter, but people who thought that this was good for the country looked upon the 2019 election as a doubling down on the mandate for Brexit. And look what you've done. Look what you've done. I hope you take a moment to reflect upon this. You've let yourselves down, you've let your family down, and you've let your country down. And I'm afraid those of us who told you what you were doing, I think we deserve a little bit more respect and gratitude, quite frankly, and a very good place to start would be Twitter. Apologies, please, to @MrJamesOB, and I'll read the best ones out after this.
LBC, Nick Ferrari at breakfast with Tom Swarbrick.
Nadeem Zahawi, you are the third Chancellor in Boris Johnson's government. The first, Sajid Javid, said, "I regret to say that this situation will not change under your leadership, Prime Ministers." Will the Prime Minister change?
We make decisions, whether it's Secretaries of State, Chancellors or Prime Ministers, at warp speed, and we don't get every decision right every time. But I think actually it's good leadership to come out and say that I made a mistake and I'm sorry for that.
It was forced out of him. He could have said this on Sunday.
With the benefit of hindsight, he shouldn't have appointed Chris Pinchot.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast with Tom Swarbrick. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LBC.
11:49 is the time. PMQs is almost upon us. Keir Starmer, when he gets to his feet in a House of Commons that at the moment, with about 10 minutes on the clock, is very, very sparsely populated on the government benches. I mean, hardly anybody, in fact, on the government. Well, that's not true at the back, but the Labour, as you'd expect, benches are absolutely rammed, and the government benches are, close to empty. A bit like the cabinet. Very much an IKEA. Well, no, it's not fair on IKEA. Someone's just tweeted a joke about it's an IKEA cabinet now. It'll fall apart very quickly. But I find IKEA furniture, if you put it together properly, very, very sturdy, and it lasts for a very long time. They wouldn't have dominated the market in the way that they have done. I love the idea of someone just tuning in now and thinking, why is Alan Partridge on the radio talking about IKEA cabinets at the time of probably the biggest political crisis since the last one? Because we forget, don't we? I mean, Theresa May, David Cameron, all of the disastrous votes on Brexit and what have you. And, of course, we also forget that a lot of people will not be ready yet to admit that the awfulness of Boris Johnson is an inevitable consequence of the awfulness of Brexit. Because there'll still be, as these resignation letters prove, claiming that getting Brexit done has A, happened, and B, was a good thing to happen anyway. Here is the stupidest man in Parliament, Lee Anderson, speaking to the BBC a few moments ago.
Look, I've been a massive supporter of the boss since I got elected here in 2019. I think he's got all the big calls right. He got Brexit done. I think he was very good through the pandemic. Really, really good through the Ukraine war. But this last incident over the past week has really done it for me. I cannot accept some of the stories coming out of Number 10. It's not just about the Prime Minister. It's the old Number 10, the operation, how we get our comms so wrong. There's denials and then admissions. And I'm gutted for the Prime Minister because I think he's done a great job and I'm a massive supporter of him. But at the end of the day, we can't allow this sort of stuff to go on.
Thick as mince. Seriously, 30p mince, actually. Value mince. Call it what you will mince. Absolutely incredible. He's done a great job. I mean, crikey, give your head a wobble isn't even strong enough to describe what that fella needs to do to himself. But that is absolutely incredible. He's done a great job. He got Brexit done. Seen where the pound is today, seen where the labour market is today, see what's going on with the economy today, see what the GDP is doing today, see what the OBR forecasts are today. Yeah, it's a great job. Well done, Brexit. And if you build an entire administration upon lies, it will eventually fall apart. And yet someone like Lee Anderson is too stupid even to see the lies that are right under his nose. 11:51 is the time. Glenn is in Stoke-on-Trent. Glenn, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello,
Glenn. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm just sitting back and smiling to myself because I go back to, way before he was the mayor, and how people didn't realise then he was an habitual liar, with the tape recording of when he was going to have that journalist beaten up.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I'd like to argue with you, but I don't think I can. I mean, there were lots of things that should have undermined that ebullient, buffoonish bonhomie that he betrayed on the telly, weren't there? But we didn't. I didn't.
Yeah, and it's just gone on from there. I sort of smiled to myself this morning that when I saw that our local MP, Jonathan Gullis, who's been four square behind Johnson, has also, jumped the sinking ship.
Yes.
And another one, is another one who, to me, is as thick as a whale omelette. He just...
It's your neck of the woods, though, isn't it? Gullis's constituency,
exactly.
as you mentioned. Yeah. So what about this tension, which I think we'll probably be talking about a lot in the weeks to come, once Johnson has gone? What about the tension between getting rid of him isn't going to suddenly make Brexit something that was a good idea? Stoke was quite a big Brexit-supporting town, I think, city.
Well, that's right, yeah. I mean, I wasn't one of them.
Right.
But I go back to, and I don't know whether it was your analogy or I heard it on your show about the getting the UK out of the EU was like taking the egg out of a cake.
It was mine, actually.
Yeah,
it's even in my book, so I can prove it. I've got a copyright on that as well.
Well, I've got the book as well, so yeah.
Lovely.
I think that analogy now is also very useful for the Tory party, whereas the Tory party's the cake and Johnson's the rotten egg that has gone into the cake. And if you take Johnson out, the rotten egg is still in there. So I think whichever way they jump now, whether they resign or whether they don't, I think the only way they're going to clean up the Tory party is throwing that cake away and making another one.
So, I mean, the calculation clearly, and in some ways, if you were a dyed-in-the-wool Tory supporter, your perspective, and indeed my perspective, would be more interesting than those of us who are sort of watching it all fall apart with a modicum of satisfaction, underpinned, of course. I mean, you say you're sitting there smiling, but it is our country that's on fire, even if
that's right, yeah.
But you don't think that they will be able to shrug off the association, that when Johnson's gone, they'll dust themselves up. The ones that are employable in cabinet or ministerial roles will just pretend it never happened and they completely ignore the stench and trust that voters will too. I think I'm probably a bit more cynical than you. Oh, no, we're equally cynical. You think they won't be able to do that?
No, I think they'll try. But
Yeah, they'll try.
I just think that stench is there and it won't go away.
What about the ones who've jumped first? The Javids and the Sunaks, do they get it?
I think they do, because they've been part and parcel of all this.
That's the point, isn't it? They're absolutely
falsehoods.
Absolutely part and parcel of it.
So I don't think any of them are immune. It's like they've got the coloured water on them when they broke into a safe. It doesn't go away, does it?
Indeed, it doesn't. And that is the key question, isn't it? And that's why I am going to have to find ways of tempting traditional Tory voters onto the programme. I want to speak to you if you've seen The Light. I'm not going to apologise for that phraseology now. I'm not. I've been very, very polite. Contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned. You've seen what he is now. If you're still clinging to the idea that he's anything other than what I've been telling you for the best part of a decade, then I'm afraid you're a complete cult, and there's absolutely nothing I can do to help you. I've done it, and he's now proved it. So if you're still there, I back Boris, #something, then I'm really sorry for you, and especially for your loved ones and your family, because you must be going through hell while pretending that everything's actually going swimmingly. And that is awful. It's an awful position that he's put you in, but my sympathy is now exhausted. Rachel Venables is here. Have you done this before?
I haven't.
How exciting.
What a day to join you for
debut.
Prime
What's your
Minister's
first ever
questions?
Prime Minister's questions? That could well be Boris Johnson's last ever Prime Minister's question.
We shall see, but it's going to be a big one, isn't it?
Yes.
4 minutes to go. We can see the House of Commons chamber filling up. I've just seen Sir Keir Starmer walking in. He's got Rachel Reeves to his right, Angela Rayner to his left. Tory benches are not looking as full as I think I'm used to seeing them.
No, they've filled up a
gaps.
little from
little.
before, and equally, there's going to be people sitting on the Tory benches that have resigned from the government in the last 12 hours. So, that's not exactly numbers that you'd necessarily want. What do we think Starmer's going to do? And I know this is going to be completely speculative for both of us. And your first ever PMQs, it's a huge ask. What will he do? What's he going to go in? And he's just got to go in on will the Prime Minister resign?
I think he has to.
Don't you think?
And I think he'll do what he's started to do more and more recently, which is he'll look behind the Prime Minister to the men and women sitting on those benches behind him. And I think he'll address them again. And he'll talk about the other cabinet ministers and he'll say to them, join your colleagues, Rishi Sunak, Sajid Javid. We've just seen Victoria Atkins in the past few minutes. I think
what
he'll
are we
really...
up to now? 16, is it? Or
16 by
17?
my
16,
count.
Yeah. Incredible.
And he's going to do everything he can to push their buttons and to say, you need to get this man out of office. I think he'll do that. I think he'll ask questions on decency and ethics. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't start to ask about what the Prime Minister did or didn't know about Chris Pincher. Sexual harassment, those sorts of issues in and around the House of Commons. And then the question is, does he revert by the end back to what he does really every week, which is cost of living, the economy?
It might do. And will Johnson bang on about vaccines and job figures in ways that are demonstrably dishonest at best and downright deceitful at worst? I'm hearing that the 22 committee is drawing up contingency plans for leadership hustings to start as soon as Monday. That means that they could have a leadership contest before recess, but it would involve Johnson going by the end of this week.
Yeah, so every time there's a new Queen's speech, their top executive team have a reset, really. So the timing of this is just staggering. I mean, all of those resignations happening not just before PMQs, then there's the liaison committee at 3:00, and you've got the 1922 committee, and we've already had people like Andrew Bridgen, who is running on a platform off changing the rules and making it so they can have a new vote of confidence in the Prime Minister. And we've also seen new letters going into Sir Graham Brady again today. So and I've been speaking to MPs this morning down at the House of Commons on College Green, and the Tory MPs who don't like him either think he'll go based on cabinet resignations, and if not, they're pretty confident they can change the rules and get him out within weeks.
More letters than there are support. If you have I forget how many MPs, I forget exactly what the number is, but if you have more than half of Conservative MPs submitting a letter of no confidence, it's unprecedented, but even Johnson might see that there's no point in putting that to a vote, or there's no point in testing that water because you know exactly what temperature it is. I also have here's a little scoop, on impeccable authority, and you're going to have to take my word for that Johnson was due to dine with a fairly well-known Tory donor tonight. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, but but certainly a little scoop that dinner has now been cancelled.
Not surprising, really.
In the last couple of hours. It isn't surprising. You'd be a bit pushed, wouldn't you, to turn up for a slap-up feed with all the trimmings with this hanging.
I was going to say, I think he's going to, at the end of this, he's going to want to go and have a good night's sleep, I think, if nothing else. Have a lie down in the dark and recover, because he's in for quite a few hours. We know Boris Johnson, he fights, he gets into a corner and he fights out of it. And there have been many times where we've expected other prime ministers perhaps would have given up. He does not. And that's why we've just seen him walk into the chamber. He's prepared to
cheers
face...
from loyalists. I mean, he can't hide now, can he?
No.
Gove, I suppose, would be the resignation of the greatest import. Jim Pickard of the Financial Times just suggested the ideal time for Gove to resign would be 12:01. He even has the letter from last time. It would just be a quick update. I don't know if that's true. If you don't normally listen to us at this time, I generally resist the urge to indulge in sub-Graham Norton style commentary over the top of PMQs, but I can never promise categorically that I'll be able to resist that temptation. And we generally cross live to the House of Commons when Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, gets to his feet, which is probably imminent. We normally come back usually after... here we go. Here is Keir Starmer for PMQs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is a big day as we implement the biggest tax cut. For a decade, increasing national insurance thresholds to make tax lower and the tax burden easier. These changes will benefit 30 million people across the UK. And I'm pleased to say that two of those people are seated here in the public gallery today. Mandy Banfield and Alan Calzari, a typical worker, will now save £330 per year, with 70% of employees better off as a result. That is real money for real people. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the House will also join me in wishing the best of luck to England and Northern Ireland, who are competing in the UEFA Women's Euro 2022 tournament, which starts today, and I'm sure they will both make the nation proud. This morning, Mr. Speaker, I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I expect I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, sir. Last week we launched a new approach.
We will wait until Keir Starmer gets to his feet. Paul Brand of ITV, who has been doing some sterling reporting of late, understands that 1922 executive meeting at 4 o'clock to discuss rule changes will be followed by a meeting with Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, at 5 o'clock. Pippa Crerar at the Mirror. Is it bye Boris? Boris Johnson about to face the Commons for the PMQs on a torrid day for his leadership. Patterson, Partygate and Pincher, Rachel Venables, have pushed many Tory MPs to the edge.
Beautiful alliteration there, James.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Patterson, yeah. I mean, I'd add prorogation to that, just to go for the quadruple, all 4 Ps. Prorogation, Patterson, Partygate and Pincher. But everybody will have their own answers to the question of which particular straw broke this camel's back. So as I was explaining before we leapt a little prematurely into Parliament, we're going to stick around a little longer at the end, just to see whether or not the sea changes. And here is Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is the start of the Women's Euros, and I know the whole House will wish the Lionesses the very best of luck in bringing football home. Mr. Speaker, it's also... Mr. Speaker, it's also been 40 years since the death of Terence Higgins. Terence worked at Hansard by day and Heaven by night before he sadly died of AIDS. The Labour Party and the Terence Higgins Trust are committed to ending new cases of HIV by 2030. Together we can. Mr. Speaker, last week a government minister was accused of sexually assaulting a young man. I want to quote the victim's account. He says, "He grabbed my arse and then he slowly moved his hand down in front of my groin. I froze." I accept that's not easy listening, but it's a reminder to all those propping up this Prime Minister just how serious the situation is. He knew the accused minister had previously committed predatory behaviour, but he promoted him to a position of power anyway. Why?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that individual, the member for Tamworth, no longer has the Conservative whip. He no longer has a job. He is no longer, as soon as I was made aware of the allegation that he has just read out, Mr. Speaker, the complaint that was made, he lost his status as a Conservative MP, and he is now the subject, Mr. Speaker, of an independent investigation to the Complaints and Grievances panel. And that is entirely right. And I want to say to him, Mr. Speaker, I want to say to him that I abhor bullying and abuse of power anywhere in Parliament, in this party or in any other party.
Keir Starmer.
None of that explains why he promoted him in the first place. And we've heard it all before. We know who he really is. Before he was found out, he's reported to have said he's handsy. That's the problem. Pincher by name, pincher by nature. Now, has the Prime Minister ever said words to that effect? And I'm not asking for bluster and half-truths. We've all had enough of that. Yes or no?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to trivialise what happened. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'm not, because the very serious complaints have been raised against the member for Tamworth, and they're now being investigated, Mr. Speaker. It is true. It is true that a complaint was raised when he was in the Foreign Office, and the matter was resolved. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true, Mr. Speaker, that it was raised with me. I greatly regret that he continued in office, and I've said that. I have said that before, Mr. Speaker. I have said that before, Mr. Speaker. But it is now the subject of an independent investigation, and that is the right thing, Mr. Speaker. And frankly, I think the people of this country would like also to hear. They would like also to hear about other jobs that are held by people in this country, not least the 500,000 people who got off welfare into work in the last 6 months alone, Mr. Speaker. Those are things that are making differences to the lives of people up and down the country, and I'm proud of it.
Keir Starmer.
No one's cheering that.
No denial. And he says the matter was resolved when he means it was upheld.
Exactly.
And they're all sitting there as if this is normal behaviour.
Exactly.
When that young man reported his attack to a government whip, she asked him if he was gay. When he said that he was, she replied, "That doesn't make it straightforward." That comment will sicken anyone who's experienced sexual assault and then be made to feel like they somehow asked for it, or who worry that prejudice means their complaint won't be taken seriously. Will he apologise for those disgraceful comments on behalf of his government?
Mr. Speaker, I've already said that I regret very much that the member for Tamworth continued to hold office after the complaint was made against him in the Foreign Office, and it was resolved in the Foreign Office. His apology was accepted, but clearly that was not enough. And in hindsight, Mr. Speaker, I should have realised that he would not change. However, when it came to the Friday of last week, and when I was given the information that he's read out about the complaint that was made against the honourable member, I acted immediately, Mr. Speaker, and I took the whip away from him. And we will not tolerate...
That's just not true. I'm sorry to interrupt, but he did not act immediately. That is...
Any other party, Mr. Speaker. And what we also want
measurably
to do
false.
is to help people up and down the country with the things that also matter to them, like cutting their taxes, Mr. Speaker, by £330 this year, which is what we're doing.
Keir Starmer.
Doesn't that just sum him up? Awful behaviour, unacceptable in any walk of life. It's there for all to see, but he ignores it. It was the same when his ally was on the take from the lobbyists. It was the same when his Home Secretary was bullying staff. It was the same when taxpayers' money was being abused. And it was the same when he and his mates parted their way through lockdown. Anyone quitting now, after defending all that, hasn't got a shred of integrity. Mr. Speaker, isn't this the first recorded case of the sinking ships fleeing the rat?
Mr. Speaker, look, he talks about... He should hear what his lot say about him, Mr. Speaker. He talks about integrity. he wanted to install the member for Islington North into number 10, Mr. Speaker. That's what he wanted to do. Imagine what our country and what the world would be like now. He talks about integrity. He voted 48 times to overturn the will of the British people and take us back into the European Union. And by the way, listening to his muddled speech the other day, that is exactly what he would do again. Mr. Speaker, he talks about integrity, but Mr. Speaker, he has voted time and time again against sanctions on criminals that would put them behind bars. This is the government that is tough on... I'm sorry, he talks about integrity. He is himself facing a criminal investigation, Mr. Speaker, for which he asked me to resign.
Keir Starmer.
What a pathetic spectacle. Exactly. The dying act of his political career is to parrot that nonsense. Yep. And as for those who are left, only in office because no one else is prepared to debase themselves any longer, the charge of the lightweight brigade. Some self-respect. Mr. Speaker, for a week, he's had them defending his decision to promote a sexual predator. Every day, the lines he's forced them to take have been untrue. First, that he was unaware of any allegation. Untrue. Then, he was unaware of any specific allegation. Untrue. Then he was unaware of any serious specific allegation. And now he wants them to go out and say that he simply forgot that his whip was a sexual predator. Anyone with anything about them would be long gone from his front bench. In the middle of a crisis, doesn't the country deserve better than a Z-list cast of nodding dogs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's exactly when times are tough and when the country faces pressures on the economy and pressures on their budgets, Mr. Speaker, and when we have the biggest war in Europe for 80 years, Mr. Speaker, that is exactly the moment that you'd expect a government to continue with its work, not to walk away, Mr. Speaker, and to get on with our job and to focus on the things that matter to the people of this country. And so we're not only cutting taxes today, Mr. Speaker, we're putting £1,200 into every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in the country, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the strength of our economy and thanks to the decisions that we took, Mr. Speaker, which he opposed at the time.
Keir Starmer.
The only thing he's delivering is chaos. I started this session with a quote from the young victim in all this, how he froze when he was attacked. When I was prosecuting rapists, I heard that from victims all the time. Victims said they froze because it's not about sex, it's about power. And the power the disgraced government minister had was handed to him by that Prime Minister. And he's only in power because he's been propped up for months by a corrupted party defending the indefensible. So it's no longer a case about swapping the person at the top. Isn't it clear? The only way the country can get the fresh start it deserves is by getting rid of the lot of them.
Mr. Speaker, the difference between this...
Shh. We've got to get through Prime Minister's questions. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the difference between this government and that opposition is we have a plan and they do not. We're getting on with it. They want to focus on this type of issue, Mr. Speaker. We're going to get on with our jobs. We're going to control prices, Mr. Speaker, by not giving in to the union barons. They're paid by the union barons, and they're proud of it. We were the first European country to arm the Ukrainians, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud of that. And those guys, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite, not only do they want to put Mr. Corbyn into number 10, the member for Islington North, but 8 of them, including the shadow foreign secretary, the shadow deputy leader, and 6 others, voted to get rid of our independent nuclear deterrent, Mr. Speaker. Today we are cutting taxes, we're helping 500,000 people into work, and thanks to the strength of our economy, we're helping people up and down the country, and we are going to continue to deliver on the mandate I was given.
Johnny Mercer!
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On Monday night, the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill reached its 3rd reading. And so with it, the beginning of the end of the journey, a long journey to make sure the service and sacrifice of those who served in Iraq, Afghanistan and now Northern Ireland is not rewritten by those who seek only to line their own pockets. But would the Prime Minister agree with me that never again can we allow such a gulf to open up between this place and those who serve? Never again must they be made to feel like we are not on their side. And will he redouble his commitment to make sure this is the best country in the world, to serve in the military and be a veteran all their family?
Thanks, my honourable friend, very much. I thank you for all the work that he's done for veterans and continues to do. This bill will give veterans the certainty they deserve, and we're fulfilling the manifesto pledge to end the cycle of investigations, but also at the same time making sure that families can get the answers they need about what happened to their loved ones.
We now come to the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I give every best wish to the England and Northern Ireland ladies football team as they approach the Euro Championships. There's nothing better than seeing your teams in these finals. Can we also commemorate the passing 40 years ago of Terence Higgins and all those that have died from AIDS and sin? And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, the whole House will want to join with me in passing condolences to the family of friends of the Scottish football goalkeeping legend Andy Gorham, who sadly passed far too early last weekend. He will long live in the memory of the best goalkeeper that many of us have seen. Mr. Speaker, it's easy to forget that only 10 days ago the Prime Minister was dreaming of a 3rd term. Mr. Speaker, you know, it's often said that a week is a long time in politics, but it turns out that 10 days is truly a lifetime. Because, let's face it, it's a minor miracle that the Prime Minister has even made it through to Prime Minister's questions, and he really ought to see the faces behind him, because, Prime Minister, it really is over. The Prime Minister is desperately clinging on to his own fantasy, but the public can't afford to put up with this farce of a government a minute longer. Today, we should be talking about the Tory cost of living crisis, soaring inflation and the growing cost of Brexit. But instead, it's always about him. How many more ministers need to quit before he finally picks up his pen and writes his own resignation letter? Perhaps that's what he's doing now.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, I was just jotting down some notes on his question, which I thought was excellent when he was talking about the economy, because that is the issue that the country faces, and that is where this government is introducing, I think, the most important solution: helping families up and down the country with £1,200 going into their bank accounts right now, cutting taxes for 30 million people, £330 tax cut, and helping 500,000 people into work through the Way to Work scheme. That is a fantastic thing to be getting on and doing. That is the priority of this government, and that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm glad he likes it.
Ian Blackford.
My goodness, nothing to see. We should all move on if we live in the world of the Prime Minister. You know, a few weeks ago I compared the Prime Minister to Monty Python's Black Knight. Actually, turns out I was wrong. He's actually the dead parrot. Whether he knows it or not, he's now an ex-Prime Minister. But he will leave behind 2 deeply damaging legacies. I hope the dishonesty of his leadership follows him out of the Downing Street door. But the other legacy is that of Brexit. And that will stay. Because I'm sad to say that the Labour Party now fully supports Brexit. Mr. Speaker, Scotland wants a different future, not just a different Prime Minister. So if the Prime Minister won't resign, will he call a general election and allow Scotland the choice of an independent future, free from the control of Westminster?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I noticed that his remark that the Labour Party have given up on returning to the European Union was not greeted with rapture by the benches opposite, and that's because it's not true. They want to go back in just as he does. I think that is a terrible mistake. It would be anti-democratic, Mr. Speaker. And as for the referendum that he wants, well, we had one of them, as I've told him before, in 2014.
Come on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister think there are any circumstances in which he should resign?
I think, Mr. Speaker, clearly, if there were circumstances in which I felt it was impossible for the government to go on and discharge the mandate that we've been given, or if I felt, for instance, that we were being frustrated in our desire to support the Ukrainian people, or over some major point, then I would. But frankly, Mr. Speaker, the job of a Prime Minister...
That was the Conservative MP, Tim Lawton, asking that question, and a useful indication of why we're staying with PMQs today.
Well, there you have it, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the Prime Minister, he puts political survival before public duty. Yeah. But people can see, even if he goes, it's not an if, it's a when, isn't it? Yeah. The same Westminster arrogance will continue to dictate our futures in Wales. Yeah. Does he want a medal for being the best recruiting sergeant for independence we could wish for? Yeah.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, ever I look around the United Kingdom, I had a great talk with Mark Drakeford the other day, as well as talking to Nicola Sturgeon. I see the bonds of our union being strengthened the whole time, and I'm confident that they will continue to do so.
Link Drummond.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's town centre and levelling up funds have been very successful around the country, but there are a few town centres, like Waterlooville in Mearn Valley, that are in desperate straits and haven't managed to get any funding, get a scheme into the present round of funding. Can my honourable friend assure me that future funds will be available to help declining high streets become fit for the 21st century and survive the post-pandemic?
Yeah. I thank my honourable friend, and she's a great champion for Mearn Valley, and I will make sure that she gets a meeting with the Minister for Levelling Up at the earliest opportunity.
The Minister for Levelling Up is Michael Gove, who isn't in the House of Commons, as far as I can tell today.
Lost the plot over the cost of living crisis. The Prime Minister may be aware that the average salary for a nurse is £36,000. For a primary teacher, it is £38,000. They, and indeed working people everywhere, are struggling to pay their rents and their mortgages. Given they can barely afford a £150,000 mortgage on a new home, can he tell this House how he could afford a £150,000 treehouse?
What I can tell him, Mr. Speaker, is that up and down the country, rather than talking about fantasy infrastructure, I can talk about real infrastructure. We are helping to unite and level up the people of this country with £650 billion of investment, helping to lift the aspirations and opportunities of people up and down the country. And thanks to the strength of our economy, we're helping exactly the people he describes with £1,200 going into their bank accounts to help them with the cost of living pressures.
And the House, Peter Bottomley.
The Prime Minister knows that while he's Prime Minister, I want him to do all the good he can. While he's Prime Minister's Green and Present Land, can I refer him to EDM 1082 about the Goring Gap, the Chatsmore Farm, or to the Department of Levelling Up, the land above Goring Station, the farm in Worthing, which was fully protected and will be fully protected when another inspector says that Worthing Council protecting it will happen. Can I ask him to tell the government to withdraw their objection to Worthing Council's appeal against the absurd decision by a planning inspector to allow 482 homes to go on this green lung between Goring and Ferry?
I thank the Right Honourable John very much, and he campaigns on this issue for some time. I will make sure that he gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss the development in Goring by sea.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 21st of January, the government
committed £100 million from the Automotive Transformation Fund to British Wool, to a gigafactory in my constituency, Calais, Wansbeck.
So,
and as of today,
not that you're particularly interested in this, but the problem I have now in conjunction with Rachel Venables is that there is a fairly strong chance that there will be more shots fired from the Tory benches. That first question about whether there would be any circumstances whatsoever in which Boris Johnson would resign did indeed come from the Conservative backbencher Tim Loughton. But in the meantime, you also get the slightly less scintillating inquiries, such as the one that Peter Bottomley just saw fit to ask about some planning permission issue in his own constituency. So, I mean, what do you reckon, Rachel? Should we give it a couple more?
I think give it a couple more and see what we get.
Maybe take it up to the half-past news and then take a view on whether we're going to continue, because I can't believe there won't be more fireworks, but of course we have no way of knowing where they are going to come from.
On the passion with which he advocates investment in British folk, and I totally share his enthusiasm. And actually, I want to thank my honourable member for Blythe Valley as well, who is a heroic campaigner on this issue. I can tell him that the letter was sent last night, Mr. Speaker, an in-principle offer of support for this project through. How about that? Hang on in there, Mr. Speaker. That's what I'm going to do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The world is facing a global food crisis in which the poorest nations face catastrophic consequences. Will the Prime Minister take all possible action to negotiate and facilitate access to the grain stores stranded in Ukraine? We have a limited opportunity to avert famine in developing nations, and the UK must play its full part using all the resources at our disposal.
My right honourable friend is completely right, and there are 25 million tonnes of wheat that are basically being held hostage by Putin. That's equivalent to the annual consumption of many of the least developed countries, and we're helping to lift that blockade, not just by negotiation, but also by supplying demining equipment, insurance for the commercial ships that might be involved, and also 10 million to help improve the railway infrastructure that would be necessary to get the grain out by rail.
Mark Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister said that he is fed up of people saying things on his behalf. It's not just him that's fed up, so are the British people and his ministers who are resigning. They're sick of time and time again being sent out by him to say things that aren't true. Is the real problem him or them for believing him in the first place?
Mr. Speaker, I thank him very much, and look, I want to be clear. What I want to say is, I say it again. I regret the way the appointment happened, and I was clear with the House about what I knew at the time. But I want to stress that I take this matter extremely seriously. I'm very sorry for the impact it's had on the victims. But the individual in question, the member for Tamworth, is now subject to an independent complaints and grievance procedure. As soon as that complaint was made, I should say, Mr. Speaker, the whip was taken away.
Can I just say we don't know that is the case. It is confidential, and I think we've got to stop referring to something that we don't know there. And I want to put the House on notice that we don't mention it. Teresa Villiers.
Just over a fortnight ago, 2 horrific fatal stabbings took place in a quiet street in East Barnet. With the Metropolitan Police now in special measures for the first time in its history, will the Prime Minister urge the Mayor of London to start living up to his responsibilities as Commissioner? The Mayor needs to get a grip on crime, he needs to give Barnet its fair share of new officers, and he needs to abandon his plans to sell Barnet police stations.
Well, I do notice, Mr. Speaker, that crime has spiked since the previous Mayor of London, and it is the Labour Party that voted against stop and search, Mr. Speaker, that voted against increased funding for the police. And I think, as for the Labour Mayor, he'd do better to get out of California and take control of crime in his city.
And this will alter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the NHS Confederation, not a single one of the so-called 40 new hospitals the Prime Minister promised at the last election will be built by 2024. 2 of those new hospitals are in my constituency. Hammersmith opened in 1902 and Charing Cross opened in 1818. They're not new hospitals and there's no building going on. Like all his promises, they exist only in his warped imagination, as this is likely to be his last Prime Minister's questions. Will he finally tell us the truth?
Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, if he looks at what we promised and what we delivered, we said we'd get 20,000 police out on the streets. We've actually got 13,500 more already. We said we'd do 50,000 more nurses. We're already on track. And he's quite wrong about the pledge on hospitals. We're going to deliver them by 2030, Mr. Speaker. That was always clear. And the only reason we can do that is because we're putting the funding into our NHS, which he and his party opposed.
Gary Sambrel. Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, in an attempt to boost morale in the tea room, the Prime Minister said at a table that there were 7 people, MPs in the Carlton Club last week, and one of them should have tried to intervene to stop Chris from drinking so much. As if that wasn't insulting enough to the people who did try and intervene that night, and then also to the victims that drink was the problem. Isn't it the example, Mr. Speaker, but as the Prime Minister constantly tries to deflect from the issue, always tries to blame other people for mistakes, and that at least nothing left for him to do other than to take responsibility and resign.
Order. Can I just say, you ought to be embarrassed by clapping. This is not a debate. Mr. Esterson, it's not debating society. This is...
No, we'll leave it.
This is Prime Minister's questions. I want to get through the questions. There's other people want to catch my eye, and the way to do it is not by clapping. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there's a very simple reason why they want me out, and that is because they know, Mr. Speaker, that otherwise we are going to get on and deliver our mandate and win another general election, and that is the reality, Mr. Speaker.
Vera Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister once wrote, "It is a wonderful and necessary fact of political biology that we never know when our time is up. Long after it is obvious to everyone that we are goners, we continue to believe our duty is to hang on to the perks and privileges of our posts. In reality, we are just terrified of the come down." Yep. So for the sake of this great country, will the Prime Minister heed the advice of his former self, get over his terror, and do the decent thing?
Mr. Speaker, with great respect, I refer the honourable lady to the answer I have just given. When things are tough, of course people turn their fire on the leader of the country, but it is my job to get on and deliver our manifesto, which we are, and to deliver on the mandate on which I was elected, and to get this country through tough times, just as we got it through COVID. And that is what I'm going to do.
Fiona Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Around 1,000, I apologise, around 1,000 delegates from 100 countries are at the Freedom of Religion or Belief International Ministerial Conference over at the QE2 Centre today. There is still time for honourable members to visit. But will the Prime Minister agree with me that this significant conference will count for nothing unless it results in concerted global action to promote and protect freedom of religion or belief around the world?
I thank her very much. And freedom of religion and belief is integral to people's identity and their sense of themselves and their own personal freedom and security. And I thank her for the work she's doing as my own envoy on that subject, and also for the wonderful conference that she has.
There's also, it's 12:33 by the way, there's been another resignation. More detail on that in a moment. But there is also due to be a statement from Sajid Javid on his resignation yesterday, which I'd be quite keen to hear. So I again minded perhaps to stay here for a little bit longer, unless you are furiously opposed to that idea.
This is a timely reminder.
Because you get those questions like the one from Gary Sambrook there, who you may not have realised is actually a Conservative MP asking why Boris Johnson won't go, to which Boris Johnson responds that the reason why they want to get rid of me is because I'm going to deliver on my manifesto. Which is a very odd answer to someone who campaigned at the last general election on exactly the same manifesto. But we are, I think it's fair to say, down something of a rabbit hole.
I thank him very much, and and I share very much his support for the firefighters of our country. They do an incredible job, and overall it's a testament to their work that deaths from fire over a long period have on average been decreasing thanks to the work that they put in. We will do our best to look at the public sector pay review body offer and do our best to fund them as much as we can, but everybody knows the inflationary pressures that this country is now under. We don't want to have pay increases that are simply swallowed by price increases.
David Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The North Morton in my constituency was dubbed Britain's kindest village because this 160... Wait for it. Because this 160...
Sure, congratulations on the Kindest Village Award, but we'll take the latest headlines now with Amelia. 12:37 is the time. I think we'll let Richie make the decision on this. He says, I'm not going to lie, James, but this is really boring. I'd much rather listen to Rachel Venable's analysis. Although Matt says, keep it on, James. I think there's a broad majority, a little bit more than 52-48, that will keep one ear on PMQs on your behalf, but we'll indulge in a little bit of analysis ourselves. But with the warning, of course, that I do want to hear Sajid Javid's resignation statement live, because resignation statements are significant. I think it was Geoffrey Howe's resignation statement that marked the beginning of the end for Margaret Thatcher. I could be wrong about that, but I want to hear it anyway. And that Gary Sambrook intervention, which I think people need reminding, Rachel, he is a Conservative MP, because Johnson's reply very much would have given the impression to the, the uninitiated that he was a Labour MP, and there was stuff in that question I don't think I've heard before.
No, that was quite an explosive statement from Gary Sambrook, one of those where I think everybody listening sort of stopped and went, hang on a minute, we've not heard that before.
Well, let's have a listen to it, shall we, actually, because I think we've got it ready now.
Yesterday, in an attempt to boost morale in the tea room, the Prime Minister said at a table, but there were 7 people, MPs in the Carlton Club last week, and one of them should have tried to intervene to stop Chris from drinking so much. As if that wasn't insulting enough to the people who did try and intervene that night, and then also to the victims that drink was the problem. Isn't it the example, Mr. Speaker, but it's the Prime Minister constantly tries to deflect from the issue, always tries to blame other people for mistakes, and that at least nothing left for him to do other than to take responsibility and resign.
I think I would get very excited about the applause and why the Speaker got so upset about it, but we won't concern ourselves unduly with that. That hasn't come out before.
Not that I'm aware of, no. I've seen a few political journalists on Twitter indicating that they'd heard similar.
Right.
But I don't think that had been published this morning. I certainly hadn't seen it. I know you say you haven't seen it. And that's quite a staggering allegation to hurl across, or to hurl down at the Prime Minister from behind him, the backbenchers. Gary Sambrook saying that the Prime Minister claimed in the tea room last night that there were 7 Tory MPs in the Carlton Club on the night Chris Pincher allegedly groped 2 men, and that he'd drunk too much. Why did nobody say anything?
It's incredible because what he's trying to do is blame the MPs
It's a blame
for the behaviour of the man he put into the Deputy Chief Whip office after allegations had been substantiated, and after, because he hasn't denied it, he made jokes about him being Pincher by name and Pincher by nature. So even now, he's desperately casting around for somebody to blame.
It's that, or you can imagine it being said in a sort of jokey way, in a way that Boris Johnson always tries to do, which is to try and make the room warm to him. But, you know, when it's stated like that by somebody like Gary Sambrook, who then went on to say, is there nothing left for the Prime Minister to do other than resign? Yeah. It's quite damning when what is being accused of the Prime Minister is that he didn't take these allegations seriously enough. And for victims out there to hear the problem is, oh, well, somebody should have stopped the alleged perpetrator drinking. That's tough stuff. Sajid Javid has just stood up.
Here is Sajid Javid.
Bankers said I didn't have the right school ties. And I didn't quit when people in my community said that I should not marry the love of my life. I care deeply about public service and giving back to this country that has given me so much. That is why, when I got the call from my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, just over a year ago, I didn't hesitate to serve again. It was a critical time for our country. Tough decisions needed to be made about when we were going to come out of lockdown, about supporting the National Health Service and the care sector under unprecedented strain. It has been an absolute privilege of my life to have been trusted with these responsibilities, and I can only hope that my best has been good enough. It has undoubtedly also been one of the toughest roles that I've had so far. The gravity of Home Office decisions, the scale of Treasury decisions, but nothing matters more than the health of your people, of the British people, especially and in the wake of a pandemic. Caring for people's health and well-being is truly a noble vocation. And so I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all of those across the country working in health and care sectors, as well as those that I worked so closely with in my old department, DHSC, and in the NHS. There is so much that I planned for the long term reform of our health and care systems, and it is a wrench to leave that important work behind. Now, when I last gave a personal statement from this seat, I spoke about the importance of institutions and conventions. Today, it is about the importance of integrity. And don't worry, there's not going to be a series of these. Institutions and integrity are both central pillars that underpin our great democracy. It doesn't matter what your political perspective is in this House. I believe that we are all motivated by the national interest, and that the public expects us all of us, to maintain honesty and to maintain integrity in whatever we do. This is not an abstract matter. We've seen in great democracies what happens when divisions are entrenched and not bridged. We cannot allow that to happen here. We must bring the country together as one nation. Effective governance inevitably requires loyalty and collective responsibility. Of course it does. And I'm instinctively a team player. And I have completely focused on governing effectively over the last year. But treading the tightrope between loyalty and integrity has become impossible in recent months. And Mr. Speaker, I will never risk losing my integrity. I also believe a team is as good as its team captain, and that a captain is as good as his or her team. So loyalty must go both ways. The events of recent months have made it increasingly difficult to be in that team. It's not fair on ministerial colleagues to go out every morning defending lines that don't stand up and don't hold up. It's not fair on my parliamentary colleagues who bear the brunt of constituents' dismay in their inboxes and on their doorsteps in recent elections. And it's not fair on Conservative members and voters who rightly expect better standards from the party they supported. When the first stories of parties in Downing Street emerged late last year, I was personally assured at the most senior level by my right honourable friend's then team that, and I quote, there had been no parties in Downing Street and no rules were broken. So I gave the benefit of doubt. And I went on those media rounds to say that I'd had those assurances from the most senior level of the Prime Minister's team. Then we had more stories. We had the Sue Gray report, a new Downing Street team. I continued to give the benefit of the doubt. And now this week again, we have reason to question the truth and integrity of what we've all been told. And at some point, we have to conclude that enough is enough. I believe that point is now. I welcome the Prime Minister's public acknowledgement last night that matters could have been handled better in who he appointed and what was said about what he knew when. And I appreciated his kind and humble words and his humble spirit when I went to see him yesterday, and also the kind letter that he has sent to me. But I do fear that the reset button can only work so many times. There's only so many times you can turn that machine on and off before you realise that something is fundamentally wrong. Last month, I gave the benefit of doubt one last time. But I haven't concluded that the problem starts at the top. That is not going to change. I have concluded that the problem starts at the top, and I believe that is not going to change. And that means that it is for those of us in a position who have responsibility to make that change. I wish my cabinet colleagues well, and I can see they have decided to remain in the cabinet. They will have their own reasons. But it is a choice. I know just how difficult that choice is. But let's be clear, not doing something is an active decision. I am deeply concerned about how the next generation will see the Conservative Party on our current course. Our reputation, after 12 years in government, depends on regaining the public's trust. This is not just a personal matter. The philosophy and perception of Conservatives depends on it. It is central to the Conservative ideal that we believe in decency, in personal responsibility, and in social justice enabled by conventions and the rule of law. The Conservative mission to extend freedom and prosperity and opportunity is all at risk if we cannot uphold that ideal. And, Mr. Speaker, it is not only the Conservative Party is not the only great institution in need of urgent repair. Like everyone in this House, I have been dismayed by the drip of stories of harassment and worse by members of this House. So I'm also concerned about how the next generation will see this House and the health of our democracy. In recent years, trust in our roles has been undermined through a series of scandals. But the one thing we can control is our own values and behaviours. So it is incumbent on all of us to set high standards for ourselves and to take action when they are not met by others. Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the messages of support that I've had from many members of this House and beyond. I got into politics to do something, not to be somebody. So it is hard in one way, but not in another. Being a good father, a husband, a son, and a citizen is good enough for me. And if I can continue to contribute to public life and my party from the backbenches, it will be a privilege to do so.
Can I say to the House, there will be no more personal statements today.
Bye, Boris.
Let the House leave in peace and quiet.
12:49 is the time. Wow. I mentioned Geoffrey Howe before Sajid Javid got to his feet. I think the geography of the House meant that he delivered that speech from a similar position on the backbenches that Geoffrey Howe used when he essentially signalled the end of Margaret Thatcher's premiership. And I think probably deliberately there was some syntactical echo there as well. The analogy with the captain of a team, I'm pretty sure, or the captain of a ship, Howe used one or the other, and Javid used it there again as well. We'll discuss what we have heard and a couple of other things with Rachel Venables after this.
Coming up at 1 on LBC, Sheila Fogarty.
Boris Johnson made it to Prime Minister's questions, but the pressure is building, not receding. Should he stay or should he go?
Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
Imagine being this close to a real-life shark. Or hundreds of jellyfish. You don't have to when you visit Sea Life London, because we're home to thousands of sea creatures from all around the globe. As for seahorses that sound like... or a turtle that plays its flippers like a tambourine. Don't hold your breath on those. You'll have to visit to see the real sorts. See the wonder under London at Sea Life London Aquarium.
At TalkTalk, we're helping the nation to save money on their broadband. If you're out of contract on your superfast fibre, you could save £338 on average by switching to TalkTalk. For just $24.45 a month for 24 months and no setup fees. So switch now and save big. Search TalkTalk. TalkTalk for everyone. CPI plus 3.7% annual increase from April 2023. Average saving on Fibre 65 versus competitors publicly available out-of-contract non-promotional pricing on 9th May 22. Ends 13th July, subject to availability.
Many people struggle with loose and missing teeth. Often their dentist has told them nothing can be done. Let the TDC team restore your teeth, your smile and your confidence with our award-winning Smile in a Day dental implant treatment. Book your consultation today. Visit smileinaday.co.uk.
TDC.
Hey, Harry.
Hello, mate.
Should I back the underdog or risk a few extra quid on the favourite?
Listen, everyone knows that I like a bet, but if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's this. No matter what the amount, no matter whether you're backing a player or buying a racehorse, your best bet is never to spend more than you can afford. That's why BetVictor's new affordability measures are specially designed to help you avoid ever spending beyond your means.
Listen to Harry and please gamble responsibly. 18 plus, be gamble aware.
Hello, Britain. Albert Einstein here. To those of you who have got a smart meter, I applaud you. You are helping to modernize Britain's outdated energy system, helping us use more renewable energy. The downside of doing this message on radio is that you can't see that I'm proudly toasting you with a cup of Earl Grey. But the upside is, you can't see that I'm still in my dressing gown. Cheers.
Search Get a Smart Meter today. Consumer action required. Eligibility may vary.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with James O'Brien.
12:52 is the time, and thank you to everyone who reminded me it was a cricket captain analogy, including Sheila Fogarty, who'll be with you shortly, who reminded me that Geoffrey Howe talked about members of a cricket team being sent out to bat only to find that their bats had been broken by the team captain. I think Sajid Javid's message there was similar. Rachel Venables.
It was. I mean, and it's so interesting that he talked about that real disquiet that he and his colleagues have been feeling. We heard the same from Will Quince, why he resigned, because they've been sent out to bat, you could say, on the media rounds where they do those interviews with Sky News, BBC, Nick Ferrari in the morning and everybody else. And they are told lines, they are assured certain points by number 10. And it happened with Partygate and it happened again with Chris Pincher, that they were told things that ended up being effectively not true. And their fury, their personal disappointment that they went on and told something that wasn't true to journalists and to the public, they feel that very deeply.
And lied too as well. I mean, because I hadn't heard that before, that Downing Street assured him that no rules had been broken and no parties had been thrown. I mean, that's astonishing, given that we now know they
how many hundreds of
fixed
penalty notices later.
We've had 2 more resignations as well.
We have, yes. We've had 2 more from Stuart Andrew resigning as Housing Minister. He tweeted a letter at 12:41. So interestingly, he probably would have sat there. I didn't see him in the Commons. I don't know if he was sat there, but he would have probably watched what the Prime Minister had to say, and he tweeted this letter out anyway, saying he's been honoured to serve in a number of roles. He says, loyalty and unity are traits I've always endeavoured to provide for our great party. However, I fear I've let these override my judgment recently. There comes a time when you have to look at your own personal integrity. 2 words, actually, that we kept hearing from Sajid Javid as well. He said there comes a time where you have to put the integrity first. And Stuart Andrews saying that time is now. And we had another resignation right at the start from Joe Churchill, another more junior minister, a shorter letter, but saying that recent events have shown that integrity, competence and judgment are all essential to the role of Prime Minister. And then there's a bit of a, I don't know what this is, while a jocular self-serving approach is bound to have its limitations. So that's putting it rather more mildly than some of her colleagues.
And I mean, we forget, of course, because we stayed with it for much longer than usual, but it began with Keir Starmer having one of his best performances ever, and probably his best joke ever, the charge of the lightweight brigade. That's just first class. Even some Tory frontbenchers were chuckling at that.
I liked the ship leaving the rats.
I'm told by his son that was stolen from Bill Cash, the MP for Staffordshire, that joke, but I don't know whether that's true or not.
And there was what was the other one? There was the Z-list cast of nodding dogs, as he described. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He will be very pleased. His team will be very pleased with how he handled that today. I think it was a good measure. They'll see it as the sort of forensic lawyer approach, but he had a bit of humour. He had a bit of personality. And Boris Johnson, was struggling. And he was also struggling, I think you could tell by the fact that those faces behind him, Dominic Raab to his right,
Nadine Zahawi
to his left.
Nadine Dorries one seat down.
Stony-faced.
Yes. Well, no, Nadine Dorries wasn't. Everybody else was.
Okay.
This is a point made rather well, I think, by one of the political correspondents. Let me see if I can find it in time. No, I haven't got it. But just saying that the front bench looks absolutely miserable, except Nadine, obviously. Which, I mean, I'll let you read into what you want to read into that obviously. I mean, it's incredible, this, isn't it? You normally have an inkling of how things are going to unfold, but Johnson's determination to hang on in the face of ever-mounting opposition is a thing to behold.
Yeah.
You know, that quiet word, the men in suits or whatever it might be, is clearly not going to land with him, but the 1922 may take the decision away from him later today.
And I think there are many people who in a similar position would have woken up this morning and faced PMQs and then the liaison committee, the 1922 committee as well in the future, and would have gone, you know what, it's not worth it. I don't want to go out. I don't want to face Keir Starmer, questions from my own team. And they would have given up. Not Boris Johnson. That is, you know, for his allies, for the people who like him, they'll say that's one of his biggest strengths, is that he just keeps on fighting.
And we shouldn't forget, of course, that Sajid Javid's statement there could also be viewed as something of an opening salvo in a forthcoming leadership contest at the top of the Conservative Party. And speaking of leadership contest at the top of the Conservative Party, it's easy to forget that David Davis was very much the favourite until a young man called David Cameron came to the fore not that long ago. And David Davis was the third Conservative MP this afternoon to call upon the Conservative Prime Minister to resign.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw the Prime Minister's attention to the words he used in response to my right honourable friend, the member for Worthing, when he asked the question earlier. 6 months ago, I called on the Prime Minister to resign because even then it was clear that his approach to leadership and integrity was already creating a pipeline of problems that will paralyse proper government. Today, I ask him to do the honourable thing, to put the interests of the nation before his own interests, and before, in his own words, it does become impossible for government to do its job.
Prime Minister.
I thank him very much for the point that he's made again. I've just got to, I respect. I just couldn't disagree with him more. Look at what the government is doing today. Cutting taxes for 30 million people. We've just completed a programme to get 500,000 people off welfare into work, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the strength of our economy, thanks to the position that we're now in, which was because of decisions that we took that they opposed, and it's to never forget. We are able to give £1,200 to 8 million of the poorest and most vulnerable families in this country. That is the right thing to do. We're getting on with it, and we will continue with our active and energetic programme for the benefit of this country, uniting and levelling up and unleashing the prosperity of the entire nation.
And presumably somebody somewhere is still sort of cheering that absolute gibberish from the man who should never have been allowed anywhere near the doorstep of Downing Street, let alone the inner sanctum. But hey-ho, that's enough from me, and not enough, actually, from Rachel Fenner. It was a sparkling debut in the PMQ seat. Thank you, Rachel. And up next is Sheila Fogarty.
I'm going to have a bit more with Rachel in a minute as well. Stay where you are, madam. The irony shouldn't be lost on us that a Prime Minister who repeatedly and wrongly linked the Labour leader to Jimmy Savile should, in all likelihood, finally fall because he knew about, protected and promoted a sexual predator. Keir Starmer didn't reserve his ire for the Prime Minister alone, telling every Conservative MP who defended the Prime Minister when he lied, told half-truths and generally hid, that they don't have a shred of integrity either, in his view. Ian Blackford of the SNP had compared Boris Johnson to Monty Python's Black Knight, you know, the one he insists multiple fatal blows, 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 multiple